5, 6, 7, 8.
Hi EXers, welcome to the EX podcast episode number 36. This is your host, Stefan Vincent. I've started this podcast because I believe that companies have to think of themselves as employment brands if they hope to attract and retain talent. The podcast brings a different lens to the employee experience, a brand and customer experience perspective rather than a traditional HR perspective. Our guests, all thought leaders and disruptors in the EX space in their own way, come to this show to debate, discuss, and share best practices on the key components that foster employee engagement and strengthen company culture, and also to spark the conversation on how to create positive employee experiences. One size doesn't fit all. What Airbnb or Google do around the employee experience may not be applicable in a smaller company. This is what this show is all about, sharing stories of companies of all sizes, not only to show that EX doesn't require a large budget or large team, but also that there isn't one recipe. Each company can find its own way through the EX journey. Today's guest is Alexander Kjerulf, Chief Happiness Officer at Woo, a leading international consulting firm on happiness at work. Alex is based in Copenhagen, Denmark, and has worked with hundreds of clients in over 45 countries since 2003, including Lego, Accenture, Microsoft, or McDonald's. Today with Alex, we will talk about what happiness at work means, what companies can do to create a meaningful and purposeful work experience, how to get buy-in from management and employees, how to maintain a high level of happiness over time, and what differences he sees between Europe and the US around the employee experience. This episode is brought to you by Fusion Alliance. Fusion Alliance delivers holistic solutions fusing together data, digital, and technology to redefine customer experiences and move your ideas to execution. That's why businesses across multiple industries have relied on Fusion's expertise and partnership for over 25 years. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Alex. If you get a chance, please make sure to review the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, or YouTube. And last thing, if you want to send me feedback, suggestions for future topics or guests, you can reach me at svincent@exsummit.com or on Twitter at @EX_summit. Thanks for your support and loyalty. Let's get to it. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the EX podcast. Very excited for today's guest, Alexander Kjerulf. Alex is the CHO or Chief People Officer at Woohoo in the beautiful city of Copenhagen in Denmark. Alex is the author of Happy Hour is 9 to 5, How to Love Your Job, Love Your Life, and Kick Butt at Work. And he also speaks around the world on how to bring happiness in the workplace. Alex, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Stefan. It's a pleasure to be here, though I do have to correct your introduction a little bit. My company is not called Woohoo, it's called Woo!
Oh, woo!
Very good. It's spelled Woohoo, but it's pronounced Woo!
All right. Well, so tell us about who you are and what is your background and what Woo is about.
Sure thing. We're, as you said, we're based in Copenhagen. We're a small consulting company, and we make people happy at work. We do speeches, workshops, and management trainings all over the world. We've been to almost 50 countries so far. And we work with clients like Lego and IBM and Hilton and Hermes and many, many other big organizations around the world. My personal background, I got into this business way back in 2003. I have a past in software tech, in software consulting. I had a consulting company in Copenhagen that I co-founded. We sold it in 2002. And at that point, I asked myself what my true mission in life is, and I realized that while software is amazing, what I'm truly passionate about is happiness at work. Basically, I've seen and I felt it myself. What happens to people when you have a job you love, and I've also seen how it can wear you down when you have work that you hate. When you dread going to work every morning when you got to get up in the morning. I've tried that myself. So I thought that happiness at work is so damn important. So that's what I've been doing since 2003, is basically promoting happiness at work to workplaces all over the world.
Well, so let's talk about happiness. What is happiness at work, and how do you define it?
And that is such a fundamental question, and it's a question that I think a lot of workplaces get wrong, because a lot of workplaces think in terms of job satisfaction, right? They have the annual job satisfaction survey, and they're trying to make their employees satisfied. However, and what often happens is that companies do a lot of things to make their employees satisfied, but it doesn't have the results they want. It doesn't seem to improve motivation or productivity or engagement in the workplace. And I think what's going on is that they have the wrong conception of what they should be focusing on. So they're focusing on satisfaction, what people think about their jobs, right? Your job satisfaction is when you sit down and you weigh all of the circumstances of your work situation, like your salary and your working hours and your responsibilities and your compensation and your bonus and your title and all of that. And you sit down and you weigh that sort of intellectually, rationally, and that's when you decide, am I satisfied or not? It's more of a rational deliberation. The way we define happiness at work is that it's what you feel about your job. So job satisfaction is what you think about your job. Happiness at work is what you feel about your job. On a perfectly normal work day, a perfectly normal Wednesday, when you're sitting at your desk doing your job, how do you typically feel? Do you typically go around experiencing positive emotions like pride in the work you do, or a feeling of accomplishment because you're good at it, or a feeling of being accepted and appreciated as a human being because you work with nice people? Or do you spend a lot of time at work experiencing negative emotions like stress, fear, frustration, anger, disappointment? And I think that is the crucial distinction here, is that happiness at work is what we feel about our jobs. And it's about creating workplaces where people feel good most of the time, experience positive emotions. And I just want to make this perfectly clear. It's not about being perfectly happy every second of every day, because that's simply impossible, right? If somebody's happy every single second of every day, there's something very wrong with them. Yeah, right? But it is about creating workplaces where most of us feel good most of the time, where you can come home most days and say, you know what, today was a good day. I'm excited to go back to work tomorrow.
There are many studies that show that only about a quarter of employees are really engaged at work. And 50% are somehow in the twilight zone of engagement, not fully engaged, not completely switched off, and the other quarter is completely disengaged. How do you compare that engagement to happiness versus satisfaction at work? Do you, from what you see and from what you hear when you talk with different companies around the world, do you see that engagement is more connected to happiness or to job satisfaction?
Well, there are different definitions of engagement at work, right?
Yes.
But the one I've seen that I like is the one from Gallup, who of course do a lot of research and measurements of engagement. And I would say that their definition of engagement is very close to happiness at work. It's very emotional, and it's very much about your experience of a typical workday. And less about all of the, less about your satisfaction with all of your work conditions and all your work circumstances. And I can tell you that certainly the data I've seen on engagement matches closely with the data I've seen on happiness at work. So, for instance, we did a study in 2015 of unhappiness at work. We asked 750 people around the world, how often do you have a really bad day at work? And 19% said every day or almost every day. Can you imagine that? 19%. have a really bad day at work every day or almost every day.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of people, right? There's a lot of people who go into work and just have one bad day after the other. For me at least, engagement is a usual employee engagement is a much more useful concept than job satisfaction, because it is closer to happiness at work.
So what makes people happy at work then?
Well, that's the other crucial question, right? Because if we don't know what it is that makes people happy, we can't do it. And that's the sad thing, is that while many workplaces do want their employees to be engaged and motivated and happy, they keep doing the wrong things, and they keep focusing on things like, perks, like massages or a gym in the office or free fruit or free coffee, right? Or they keep focusing on compensation and bonus schemes and that kind of thing. And it turns out that those things have a very, very limited potential to make employees happy at work. If you actually look at the research, and we've looked extensively at the research, and try to figure out what is it that makes people actually love their jobs, in our model, the way we see it, it can be boiled down to two main factors. And we call those results and relationships. So results is this feeling that you're good at your job, right? You make a difference, you can achieve your targets, you can accomplish your goals, you do a good job, and more than that, you're doing something that you personally find meaningful. You're not just good at your job, you're good at something you believe in, something that you believe is important, that contributes to the world somehow, makes somebody's life better, right? Think of a nurse who can see that the patients are getting better, right? Or think of a school teacher who can see that the students are learning cool new things. That's when you have meaningful results, right? So results, this feeling that I'm good at my job and I'm doing something important that I believe in, is a huge driver of happiness at work. And the other thing, relationships, is equally important. And relationships, good workplace relationships, are incredibly important. Like this feeling that you have a good relationship with your teammates, the people in your department. This feeling that you have a good relationship with your immediate manager. Not that you have to be best friends with your manager, but just this feeling that my manager sees me, knows me, understands me, wants me to succeed. My manager has time for me, cares about me. You can even have good relationships with customers or clients. You can have good relationships with people in different teams, even with vendors and suppliers. But it's clear that the most important relationships are with your immediate coworkers and your immediate manager. And there is some very compelling research on the social nature of happiness, how much of our happiness is dependent on having good relationships with other people. That goes both at work and in life. So those are the two things that make us happy at work: results and relationships. And I think if that's where we need to focus, right? If you personally want to be happier at work, think about, how can I get more meaningful results and better workplace relationships? If you're a manager and you want your employees to be happier, think about how do you create working conditions in your team that let your employees get great results, and let them work really well together so that they have great relationships. That's where we need to focus. And all that other stuff, the salaries and the compensation and the bonuses and the perks, those are nice. They need to be there, but they're not what make us happy.
So you talked about finding a meaning in what people do in their jobs, and obviously there's, we talk about a lot. We talk a lot about the company's purpose, right? To have an inspiring purpose, so that every employee buys into the purpose, and then within their own work they find fulfillments and motivation to actually perform well in their jobs. Mm-hmm. Do you see that, from what you see in companies, is it critical for the company to have a clear and inspiring purpose for people to be happy at work? Or do you see companies where they don't necessarily have an inspiring or meaningful purpose at the company level, but still employees feel pretty good about their job?
I would say that it helps to have it at the company level. It definitely helps, right? I think a wonderful example is one of our clients here in Copenhagen is a pharmaceutical company called Celia, and they make antibiotics. So their company purpose is, and it's written on a big plaque in their reception area, their company purpose is, we save lives. That's a pretty good purpose, right? But even if you don't, like, let's say you sell something completely different that doesn't save lives or directly improve human lives, you can still focus on, through the work you do, who are you helping? Whose lives are better because your products or your services or your company exists? And I think a wonderful example of this is Zappos in Vegas, right? Because Zappos essentially, they're an online retailer. They sell clothes and shoes online, and you can ask yourself, how does that make the world necessarily a better place? But I think what they've been very, very good at is realizing that through every interaction they have with a customer, they can actually make that customer's day a little bit better, and that's something they focus on a lot and find many ways to do. So as a company, they can actually directly improve the lives of the people they're serving, their customers. And I think the other thing they've done that I think is beautiful is that they have involved their employees directly in charitable activities. Yes. In charities in Vegas. So for instance, they have a big Thanksgiving event for all the homeless people in Vegas, where they can come by and get free shoes and a Thanksgiving meal. You as an employee of Zappos, you can go to the HR department. They have a whole list of charity events and organizations that you can volunteer to work for. So you can know as an employee of Zappos that you can make your customers' lives better directly, and you can also help the world through the charitable activities, and that can give work meaning, even if what the company does doesn't directly improve the world in any way.
Now, you mentioned Lego earlier as one of your clients.
Yeah.
Lego is fascinating. I mean, I'd be a huge fan of Lego first of all, as a children. I grew up with Legos, and even now as a parent. And Lego has gone through some challenging times when they were no longer relevant and they were struggling, trying to reconnect with younger kids. And they found their way, I think, actually through a redefining their company's purpose and mission. Mm-hmm. Right? So what do you see at Lego, for instance, in terms of how a company like this engages and motivates their employees to be really creative and innovative?
Yeah. Well, I think many people have forgotten this, but about 10 years ago, Lego was almost bankrupt. They were losing a lot of money and were in serious trouble. And at the time, they got a new CEO who did a fantastic job turning the company around. And I think one of the things they did was that they sort of refocused. They didn't redefine their purpose. Their purpose has always been the same, which is to help kids play well in a way that lets them learn and be creative. I don't know if you know this, but the name Lego comes from the Danish words "like God," which means play well. One of the things they did at the time was that they sort of focused back on that purpose and eliminated a lot of products that did not do well, that did not fit well with that purpose. And I think that what they do is again, to serve that purpose, they have some amazing products, and I really love playing with Legos myself. And also they support a lot of activities beyond that. Okay, so they do a lot of work with, for instance, they have in the US, they have the first Lego Robot League, where they sponsor competitions for school kids around the US to build Lego robots and then compete against each other. They do a lot of charity work with educational organizations, for instance, in Africa. They have an annual conference focused on creativity and learning. So Lego does where they also give out an annual award for learning and creativity. So again, as a company, they're very much focused on this, and of course, Lego is owned by the Kirk family here in Denmark. And from what I've never met them, from what I can tell, they are much more committed to that mission than they are committed necessarily to the financial growth of the Lego company, if that makes sense.
So among your clients and among companies that you talk to, you see around the world, who is scaling happiness at work the right way?
And by scaling, you mean what?
I mean, which are the successful companies that are able to create a meaningful work experience for the employees and to scale it to a large extent? So you could argue that it's easier to really focus on happiness at work in a smaller company than in a bigger company.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is there are plenty of examples of even very, very big organizations that are doing this well. I think a fantastic example is, of course, Southwest Airlines in the U.S., who have been doing this for 45 years now, where they say that, our most important strategic priority is that our employees are happy at work. I think that's a fantastic example. An example I really enjoy from the UK is Pret a Manger, this huge chain of cafes. They're all over the UK. They're in New York. They're in Paris, who also focus very, very strongly on hiring the right people, making sure they're happy at work, and making sure that that they have really happy staff so that they can make the customers happy. I just actually just found out this week that do you know Pret at all?
Pret? No.
P-R-E-T, Pret. Oh, they're amazing. I just found out that instead of loyalty cards, you go to many cafes and you get this loyalty card and a stamp, and when you have 10 stamps, you get a free coffee, right? They don't have a loyalty card like that. Instead, they told all their employees that whenever they want to, they can give away a free coffee. So if you get a new customer that you've never seen before, you can give them a free coffee. If one of your regulars comes in, and you enjoy that person, give them a free coffee. If somebody seems like they're having a bad day or they're having a really good day, you can give them a free coffee. So this is something they encourage their staff to do. There are no fixed rules on how many you can give or who you can give. Just whenever you feel like somebody should have a free coffee, you can give them a free coffee. And of course, that makes the customers really happy. And as we all know from the happiness research, right, it also makes the staff happy because when you make other people happy, it comes right back to yourself. So there are many examples of even very, very big organizations with tens of thousands of employees, across the world, who have actually managed to make happiness at work an integral part of their culture, and have reaped the benefits for it, because happy employees, of course, make the customers happy, and you make more money.
And that's a good point. So that leads me to two other questions. The first question is, how do you get buy-in from the managers or from managements and from the employees when you think about implementing a strategy around happiness at work?
Yeah, and I think and that's a good question, right? Because you can't do this to people. You have to do it with people, right? You can't just come in and make them happy. You have to directly engage people in making it happen, right? So I think the way you engage the managers is by showing that this is good for business results, okay? That happy teams are more effective and productive, and that happy companies make more money. And there is a ton of research on this. There's a ton of research showing that when the employees are happy, that has a direct effect on the customers, and it increases customer loyalty. We know that when employees are happy, absenteeism is lower. We know that employee turnover is lower. If people love their jobs, they will stay longer in the company. That's hardly rocket science. We know that happy employees are more creative. We know they're more productive. We know they're more motivated. They're more optimistic and positive about the future, and so on and so on and so on. And studies have shown that happy companies have higher sales, higher profits, and higher growth. So I think that's the way you convince the managers, is to say that happiness at work is not just nice; it has a direct positive impact on your results and on the bottom line. And I think the way you convince employees is I think a lot of people know this, right? A lot of people are saying, I'm going to work a very large part of my life. I want to be happy at work. So the way you engage employees in this is by saying, well, think about how much of your life you're going to spend at work. Don't you want that time to be happy and positive and something you actually enjoy doing? as opposed to a job that is really stressful and negative. And I think another way to engage the employees is also to show them that they can actually make a huge difference themselves. Whether or not a team is happy doesn't only depend on the manager. It also depends a lot on the employees, the team members, how they work together, how they help each other, how they treat each other, if they're nice and respectful towards each other. And as an employee, you can do so many things to make today a good work day for yourself and your coworkers. So I think that two-part message that this is really good for the bottom line, and it's also good for the individual, and you can make a difference. I think that's how you engage people.
So what is the methodology of the process for companies to identify what make their own employees, or what would make their own employees happy? And then how do you define a plan to implement some sort of employee experience strategy within your company?
Yeah, I would say the first part, how do you identify what makes us happy? I think the best and most reliable way to do that is through previous positive experiences. So have some way for employees to share their stories of happiness at work, stories like, here's a team I worked on that I really enjoyed, or here's a project that went really well and was just amazing, or here's my favorite coworker and why I enjoy working with that person. Because that will bring out the real examples of what it is that makes us happy at work. Sadly, very often, if you ask employees, so what would make you happier at work? People have been conditioned, you get the wrong answers because people have been conditioned to think that happiness at work is about salaries and bonuses and perks. And a lot of the times people will say, well, I would be really happy if we had a gym in the office, or I would be, really happy if we had free smoothies or whatever, right? Even if those things don't work. And then I think that the by far the best way of actually then getting this done is by directly involving the employees, right? By maybe setting up a happiness committee who could come up with some ideas and implement them. We've seen this work really well in many of our clients, that they appoint a group of really committed coworkers who are then, will come up with ideas, brainstorm with their coworkers, and then implement happiness initiatives. I also think a really powerful thing to have when you want to spread this in your organization is to put somebody in charge, to have a chief happiness officer. It's not that person's job to make everybody else happy, because that would be impossible. It's that person's job to work as sort of a project manager for the happiness project, and to make sure that there are always some initiatives going on, that they're the right initiatives, that there are not too few, not too many initiatives, and make sure that something is going on and this is being promoted inside the organization. So that's where I would focus. Ask the employees, involve them directly, and then have a chief happiness officer. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, obviously employee participation is the key, because you need to get their not only their buy-in but also their inputs, because you're the ones bringing it to life on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Now, how do you maintain that level of happiness over time?
And that's a really good question, right? Because it's not. Here's the thing: happiness at work is not a destination. It's not like you can say, okay, now the organization is happy, glad that's over with, we don't need to do anymore, right? It is an ongoing, continual process, and you will never be done. And interestingly, you can't just keep doing the same things over and over and over. Some of the things you can do will have a limited shelf life, right? You can, they will work for maybe 6 months, and then you need to come up with something new and cool ideas. So it is very much an ongoing process. I think what it takes to maintain that level of happiness over time for the whole organization is that it does take a strategic focus on it from top level management. Because if the top managers see this as just, a side project, something we can do once for 6 months and then we can forget about it, it's just not going to work. It needs to be an ongoing strategic focus from top management if you want this to work over time. And then the other thing is that you have somebody in charge, either a happiness committee and or a chief happiness officer, who can drive this project forward, keep coming up with new ideas, keep figuring out what it is that works out there in the organization, keep refining the ideas, keep coming up with new and fun things to do. That's certainly, if you look at the organizations where they've done this for years and even decades, that is certainly what they have. If you look at Zappos or Southwest Airlines, they have teams of people coming up with these initiatives, and they're constantly coming up and trying new ideas. And I think that's what it takes. You can't just do the same thing over and over and over. That's not going to work.
And that's the key. It's really to try, try, test, iterate. There's never a finished or polished product, right? It's just about testing, making some changes, testing again, and make some improvements along the way.
Yeah, I heard from I talked to one of our clients a company in the Czech Republic. Okay, they came up with an idea that a few years ago for Christmas, that they would actually drive out. They have about 100 employees. They would drive out to each employee and deliver a Christmas present to that family. So they would show up at their doorstep, ring the doorbell, and say, "Here's your present from the company." And they did it one Christmas, and people loved it. And it was everybody was like blown away by this. Then they did it again, the same thing the next Christmas, and everybody was like, I guess that's okay, right? so some of these things work really well the first time, but if you repeat it, people become accustomed to it. This is the notion of hedonic adaptation. That when nice things happen to us repeatedly, we a lot of the time we get used to it. And we don't appreciate it as much the second time. That's why the first piece of chocolate always tastes better than the 10th piece of chocolate.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you said earlier, that happiness is not a destination.
It is a journey, and yeah.
So you travel around the world. What are the differences, but also the similarities that you see, let's say, between Europe and the US when it comes to creating happiness and positive employee experiences in the workplace?
Yeah, I think the similarity is that, in my opinion, the need for results and relationships, that those are the two things that make us happy. I think that's pretty much universal. It's certainly true across all of the countries that I've spoken in. Because the need for results and relationships is just basic human psychology. Everybody needs to know that they make a difference, that they matter, and that they are accepted and appreciated and liked as human beings, that they belong to the group. So I don't, whether I speak in a workplace in India or in the US or in South America, wherever, those are the things that make people happy at work, when they know that they have great results and great relationships. That's just basic human psychology. That also goes in the rest of life. Those are the two things that make us the most happy. The differences I see is very much in how those things can be expressed. How you show people that they have results in relationships. And there are certainly things that would be perfectly appropriate in one culture, but really weird in another. Just an example, right? In a French workplace, kissing on the cheek in the morning is perfectly normal, even expected. Whereas in an American workplace, I think that will probably be really, really weird.
That's why I don't kiss my coworkers at work.
No, exactly, right? So there are definitely differences in how this is expressed. Also, there are some basic differences in how people approach work. So, for instance, in Denmark, where I'm from, being happy at work is normal, and more than normal, it's expected. In fact, in Danish, we even have a word for happiness at work called arbejdsglæde. I know that sounds weird, but arbejde in Danish means work, and glæde means happiness, so this just means work happiness. But we actually have a word for it. And, being happy at work is so normal, it's so expected that we have a word for it in the dictionary. So as a Dane, if you get a job, you fully expect it to be a good job. And if it's not, there's something wrong. In the US, for instance, many people almost have the opposite expectation. A lot of people are like, yeah, I hate my job. That's normal. So there can be huge differences in what people expect of work. And of course, if you expect work to make you unhappy, you will just accept that. If your job sucks, if your manager is really unpleasant, if your team is toxic, if your workplace is really stressful, if you don't expect anything else, you will just accept it. And we see that with many in many countries. We see that in the US. We see that in Eastern Europe. Large parts of Eastern Europe are still affected by the sort of the attitudes toward work that people had during the Soviet, when the whole region was dominated by the Soviet Union. So that's another crucial cultural distinction, and I think what we're certainly trying to show people is that this is not what work should be like. Work can be fun and something that lets you grow and something that challenges you and something that feels good, and that's what we should strive for. We shouldn't just expect work to suck and then accept it when it does.
Do you think that it's easier to focus on work happiness and employee experience in Europe because of stronger social focus versus, for instance, in the US, where it's more an individualistic culture?
Yes, I think that's certainly one thing, one crucial difference between Europe and the US. And I think another crucial difference is also that in Europe, we have stronger labor protection laws. Mm-hmm. There are simply more regulations and structures and rules in place to protect workers than there are in the U.S. You can just look at mandated vacation time, right? In most European countries, by law, workers get 4, 5, 6 weeks of vacation every year. In the U.S., you're not guaranteed anything by law, and maybe you have 2 weeks if you're lucky, right? You can look at things like maternity and paternity leave. You can look at things like protection from being fired for the wrong reasons and so on, where we have much stronger protections in Europe than workers have in the U.S. So all of these political systemic factors definitely also play in and make happiness at work sort of more of an accepted topic in Europe than maybe in the US. That being said, many of the most innovative workplaces when it comes to creating a happy workplace are American. So this is definitely not to say that all Americans are unhappy at work. Definitely not. It's just to say that there are some structures in place in Europe that seem to promote this kind of thinking more than maybe in the US.
Do you see that with the younger generations, the millennials and Gen Z coming in the workplace pretty soon too? Do you see that the trend is going to become even stronger and stronger around happiness and purpose in the workplace?
Yes, I think the young the millennials, I think they're amazing. I think they're awesome. I just did a speech for a big consulting company in Eastern Europe, and 60% of the employees they hire now are millennials, right? And they had to integrate these millennials into a very stiff consulting and accounting culture, and they were having some trouble figuring out how to do that. And I think what's so amazing about the young people coming into the workplace now is that they want to make a difference. They want to contribute to something meaningful. They don't just want a job or a career. They actually want a chance to make a positive difference in the world. So you got to show them that what we're doing in this company is not just about creating a better bottom line for the company. It's actually about creating a better world in some way. And then, of course, the young people today also demand things like feedback. They want professional and personal growth. They want to know that they matter and that they're appreciated as people. They want reasonable working hours. They want reasonable wages. And I know that a lot of the older generation managers are complaining about that and saying, these young people coming into the workplace today, they're so spoiled. What's wrong with them? But I say, what's wrong with everybody else? What's wrong with the older generations that we don't want these things? What did we lose along the way that we are now accepting work that is not purposeful, work that is not challenging and meaningful, work that does not let us grow personally and professionally? I think everybody should be like the millennials. Yes, they're young. Yes, they're impatient. Young people have always been impatient. But I think we should take them for what they are, and they're smart. They're digital natives. They can bring in a lot of cool, fresh, new ideas. And I think what's so important is that we let them be who they are. That we don't just take in the young employees and break them so they can fit into the existing mold, because that would be a disaster.
You mentioned earlier that creating happiness and positive experiences at work can strengthen retention within companies, but also at the same time you have the trends where people tend to leave companies more often and may have 5, 10, 15 different employments throughout their career, and not just one or a couple of employments. So is there a correlation between trying to create a happy workplace, but also knowing that, or having the challenge of knowing that employees are not going to stay necessarily for a long time in your company?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And you're absolutely right. I mean, in with today's working patterns, having a great workplace and a happy workplace does not mean that people will stay forever. That was in the old days, right, where people stayed in the same job for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. That doesn't really happen anymore. But maybe if you run a really happy workplace, people will stay 5 years instead of just 2 years, right? Maybe they will stay 3 years instead of just 1 year. And it's easy to see how that can save you money on recruitment costs and training costs. And also, and I think this is something people forget, if you have a really happy workplace and people leave, they go work somewhere else, maybe they come back, right? If they really, if they think back to their time working for your organization and they think, oh my God, that was such an awesome job. Maybe after 5 years working in different jobs, they will actually come back to your organization with new skills that and new knowledge that they picked up in their other jobs and new inputs and fresh information, right?
Yes, and I would argue that on the retention side, it's not because you keep your employees for a long time that it's not a metric. It shouldn't be a metric, retention, meaning just by itself. Retention doesn't mean anything if your employees stay 50 years in the company, but they don't really produce and contribute on a regular basis and to their highest level for those 50 years. So what is the most impactful for a company? Employees who are going to stay 3 to 5 years but giving 100%, or employees that are going to stay 25 years but giving 50%. True.
So it's not just about retention. It is about retention times efficiency while they're there. However, a very low retention can also be a real warning sign. I spoke at a conference in Lisbon in 2016, and one of the other speakers was this CEO of a tech company who didn't believe in happiness at work, and he thought happiness at work is complete nonsense. And then he also told everybody that that employee turnover in his organization was 60%.
And that's high.
That's very high, right? And can you imagine what that is like in recruitment costs and training costs when you have to replace 60% of your employees in a tech company every year? That's just crazy. So if you're looking at that kind of turnover, maybe that's definitely a warning sign that something is wrong. But you're right. Even if you run the best and happiest workplace in the world, people won't stay forever. And as you're saying, maybe you don't want them to. Maybe you do want them to go out and leave, and then maybe come back 5 years later with a lot of new ideas and input.
Yes, and that's something. So when people leave happily, the employer, then they're more willing to refer.
Yeah, they're out there talking about how awesome your workplace is, and you should definitely look for a job there. That place is so great. Yeah. Or whereas other people will be talking about their previous employer like, no, don't ever work there.
Right. But as you said, there's always the possibility for employees to come back with more experience, diverse experience. But at the same time, most of the time, when an employee leaves the company, the relationship ends there, at least from the employer side.
Yeah.
So companies have to rethink how they manage the exits, the employee exits, and just builds
and you have to be, and you should be really nice to people who are leaving. I know that some managers see quitting as an act of disloyalty, but it's not. People move on; they find different work, and that's perfectly normal. One of my favorite examples is, do you know Innocent Drinks?
No.
They're based in London. Make amazing smoothies and juices. A really cool company. And when you get hired, they get a baby picture of you, and they have a wall with every single employee's baby picture. And then when you quit, they make a custom made smoothie bottle with your name on it, and they put that up in a gallery. So no hard feelings. We hope you enjoyed your time here. We were happy to have you while you were here, and good luck in your future endeavors. And I think it's really crucial that you part on the best possible terms. No bitterness, just thanking people for the time they were there.
So before we go to more fun and personal questions, let me ask you a final question. How do you see employee experience and workplace happiness go in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years?
There's only I see it going up. I see a hugely increased focus on this topic for many reasons. One reason, of course, is that the global economy is mostly improving. Many countries' national economies are doing really well. I just spoke in the Czech Republic, where unemployment is essentially zero right now. And there is a huge war for talent going on among the big corporations in the Czech Republic. And that situation is happening in more and more countries. So there is more of a war for talent, which means you need to be good to your employees, so you can attract employees, and the ones you have will stay longer. Another reason, of course, is that work is increasingly moving towards knowledge work and service work. And when you're working with information or directly with clients in a customer service function, your emotional state has a direct influence on your work. And you can much better process knowledge and information. You can much better handle customers well when you're happy. So I think those two main trends together mean that this is getting an increased focus. And you see, companies I was just invited to speak in China for the first time. I'm so excited. I'm going there in a couple of months. So even in countries that you wouldn't necessarily think focus on happiness at work, places like I spoke in Vietnam recently, China, India, even there you see more and more organizations focusing on happiness at work because they realize that it is a huge competitive advantage, and that happy organizations make more money.
It's a good way to end it. Yes, happy organizations make more money.
No doubt about it.
So let me now ask you some fun and personal questions so that our audience gets to know you a bit more intimately.
Yeah.
If you were to invite a historical figure to dinner, who would that be and why?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm not sure this is a historical figure necessarily, but I would want Tom Waits, the singer, to come over for dinner because he seems like he's such an amazing person. I'm a huge fan of his music, and he tells these wild stories, and half of them are not true, or I think 90% of them are not true, but they're hilarious either way. So I think he would be fascinating dinner guest.
You travel a lot around the world. What is, if you were to pick one city for a specific reason, which city would that be, and for which reason? Oh,
they can only be one. There can only be one city. New York City.
New York City, and why?
New city is amazing to travel to. I've been there so many times. I'm actually going back next month, where we're doing our next Happiness Work Academy training. And I just love that place. New York is, it's hard to mention one reason, but because New York has everything, right? It can be, everything from the smallest cozy little restaurant to, the huge experiences and crowds and everything. I just love that place.
Talking about restaurants, what is your favorite food?
Oh man, I just love food. But I have to say, I love all kinds of food. But there's, a good cheeseburger can be a near religious experience if when it's done really, really well.
What is the essential item that you always take with you when you travel, besides your phone or laptop or tablet?
That's a good question. That's one thing. My sportswear and my jump rope. So when you travel a lot, and you eat a lot of bad food and a lot of airplane food and hotel food and that kind of thing, it's important to stay in shape. So what I found is that if I bring my some sports clothes and just a jump rope, I can actually do a lot of exercise in the hotel gym or just out on the street, and stay in shape that way, and that keeps me physically fit and also mentally fit, which is really important for me.
And you're a CrossFit guy.
Yes, yeah. I got into CrossFit 7 years ago, and I'm completely addicted.
What is the way for our listeners to follow you and on social media? There's no H.
Well, the best place is probably to go to our blog at positivesharing.com. We also have a website at woohooinc.com. But if you go to positivesharing.com, you can find there's a blog, you can find our website, you can find our Facebook account, Twitter account, LinkedIn, and so on. It's all on there. And there are also on that blog, we have hundreds of articles on happiness at work, on leadership, creativity, motivation, and everything else around happiness at work. The blog's been getting incredibly popular. We have thousands of visitors every day. So a lot of stuff on there. We also have a newsletter, free newsletter about happiness at work that people can sign up for there. So that's probably a good place to go.
Awesome, and we'll share those in the meeting in the podcast notes as well. One last word of advice or wisdom. I think
the crucial thing here, for me at least, is that we live in a world where work is not optional, right? You gotta work. Unless you're born to millionaire or billionaire parents, work is just a part of life for pretty much every single human being. So given that it's something we must do, I think it would be only fair if it's also something we enjoy. Imagine creating a world where everybody has to work, but work sucks. And work is something that breaks us down mentally and physically, and something that just, gives us stress and negative emotions. I think that would be a horrible situation. And as we talked about, for many people, that is currently the reality. You have to work, but they hate their jobs. I think that's what we need to change. I think that's what we need to do something about. Each and every one of us can make the choice and say, I want work I enjoy. I want to be happy at work. And if you don't have that where you are now, you can maybe quit and find a better job. If you are in a workplace that's not perfectly happy, maybe you can do something to make that workplace better. And I think that's a personal choice that each and every one of us can make and say, you know what, life is too short to work a job I hate when I could actually have a job that I love and that makes me happy.
It's a nice way to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Alex, for taking the time to speak with us today.
My absolute pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to the EX Podcast. If you want to learn more, visit our website at expodcast.com. If you want to find out more about our next conferences, go to exsummit.com. Finally, you can also find my manifesto on business to employee or B2E branding at b2ebranding.co. See you next week.